So I also want to go over just Refugee 101. A lot of people don't know the difference between what a refugee is and an immigrant. And it surprises me. And if you do, great. If you don't, an immigrant is someone who leaves their homeland by choice. So they decide that they want new opportunity, that they want to go find a job somewhere else, that they want to be part of a different culture, and they choose to leave um, on their own timing, with their own resources, and sometimes with family members or whomever they choose to go to a different land and make a new life. A refugee is forcibly displaced. So they have had to flee. They did not want to leave. They love their homeland. They love their farm. They love their land. They love their families. But they're forced to leave because of a few things. It could be race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion. So any of those five grounds that they're suffering persecution from. So, for example, the Somali Bantu were suffering persecution from other Somalis, so they left. Um, Iraqis are suffering persecution because of certain religions. Sudanese are suffering because of um, certain nationalities. So all of those things can be reason for them to leave. Um, the basic definition of a refugee is simply any person who, owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion, is outside the country of his or her nationality and is unable, or owing to such fear, is unwilling to avail himself or herself of the protection of that country. All that to say, that was created by the Refugee Convention in 1951. Uh, all that to say, basically, it's a person who's been forcibly displaced because of persecution for various reasons. And so they must be, to be classified as a refugee, they must be outside of their country of origin, in a different country. They have had to have fled because of fear of persecution on any of those five grounds. And this fear of persecution has to be well founded, so that the person is unable to seek protection of their own country. The term refugee is often used incorrectly to refer to people who have been displaced due to a natural disaster or environmental change. However, the usage is not strictly correct. They might be considered forcibly displaced people, but they're not considered refugees. 2009, the number was 15.2 million were classified as refugees, and 43.3 million were classified as forcibly displaced. Um, so that gives you a little idea of how many people are out there who have had to flee their home because of persecution and seek asylum in a different country. The Somali Bantu, they had to move from Somalia to Kenya. The Bhutanese had to go from Bhutan to Nepal, and they lived there for an average 18 to 21 years. Very long periods of time. And they're the sweetest people you'll ever meet, and you would never know how much pain they've been through. And what always impresses me the most with them is that even if I come in and I'm like, oh, I just stubbed my toe, it hurts so bad, they're so empathetic. It doesn't matter how small your pain might be in comparison to theirs. They're so empathetic to the littlest thing, and that has taught me a lot, that they seem to believe that pain is pain, and all of that deserves empathy. And so I've really carried that with me as I've gone forward in my own life. Here's the really interesting statistic, that if there are about 15.3 million refugees out in the world right now, less than 1% are ever going to be resettled to a third country. So if you're with students here in America, refugee students, they are the less than 1%. They are the people who have won the lottery ticket, and it's amazing that they're here. It's a real miracle that they've lived this through all that and made it over. So resettlement is really interesting. The UNHCR, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, is in charge of resettlement, and they give a few options for refugees to be resettled. Either they'll resettle them in a third country, less than 1%, If peace is restored to their former country, they will send them back. Or if it's not and it's been too long and they need to release them, they'll release them in that second country where they've been displaced. So let's say the Somalians were in Kenya and Somalia still has too much civil war to go back, they'll be released into Kenya. Um, all those scenarios are usually very hard. Ideally, you want to go back to your former country of origin, but that a lot of times does not happen. And when they are resettled here, UNHCR tries very hard to resettle them in groups and families, but sometimes families are split up. So the resettlement process is pretty rough on everyone. And in a way, their problems just begin when they're resettled. It's especially in a country like America that's so different from where they came from. So many different cultural practices, a different language. Going from a subsistence farming community and way of life to a market economy is really rough, especially when you're older and you've only known that way of life your whole life, and so it's a hard transition. Resettling here in the United States is done through VOLAGs. They're agencies, volunteer resettlement agencies. There's 9 listed in the United States. There's 3 here in Tucson, Arizona, and they're International Rescue Committee, Catholic Social Services, and Refugee Focus, which is a branch of Lutheran Social Services. So Tucson refugees are resettled here through one of those 3 agencies. And then an ethnic community-based organization like ours is there for extended services and to really see them through the first 5 to 7 years up to when they can get their citizenship, and then afterwards as they're continuing to create sustainable lives here in Arizona. So that gives you a little idea of what the refugee plight is, what their stories could look like. There's so much more information on the internet that I would encourage you to seek out, but most of all to just get to know the refugees that you will be serving. And although they don't usually love to talk about their stories right away, after a period of time they definitely will open up a bit more, and they're usually very harsh and rough stories, but they end up to be beautiful people, and so we're always grateful to be able to hear them when they're willing to talk about it. And it's a good thing to keep in mind how much they've been through when you're serving them, because if you're feeling like you're coming up against walls, it's because you are. There's some rough background there, so you want to just give them the space and room to deal with that as they need, and to give yourself the room to deal with it as you need. So